The relationship between Ukraine and Russia is a complex tapestry woven from centuries of shared history, cultural exchange and bitter conflict. It is a story of two nations with intertwined roots, yet with distinct identities and aspirations. Understanding this tumultuous past is essential to comprehending the tragic events unfolding in Ukraine today. The story begins with Kievan Rus, a medieval East Slavic state that emerged in the 9th century. This realm, centered on the Dnipro River basin, laid the groundwork for both Ukrainian and Russian culture and identity. The legacy of Kievan Rus is profound, shaping language, religion and artistic expressions in both nations. However, the disintegration of this early state in the 13th century set the stage for diverging historical trajectories. From the rise of the Tsardom of Muscovy to the expansion of the Russian Empire, Ukraine found itself increasingly drawn into the orbit of its powerful eastern neighbor. This process was often accompanied by attempts to suppress Ukrainian culture, language and national identity. The 20th century brought unprecedented suffering to Ukraine under Soviet rule. Imagine a time when Vikings navigated the rivers of Eastern Europe, connecting the Baltic Sea to the Byzantine Empire. This was the era of Kievan Rus, a vibrant civilization that emerged in the 9th century. Centered on the city of Kiev, this realm brought together Slavic tribes under a common banner, fostering trade, cultural exchange, and a shared sense of identity. Its rulers embraced Orthodox Christianity, establishing close ties with the Byzantine Empire and adopting its architectural styles, religious practices, and legal traditions. The Cyrillic alphabet, developed by Byzantine missionaries, became the foundation of written language in Kievan Rus. The legacy of Kievan Rus is deeply ingrained in the cultural DNA of both Ukraine and Russia. However, the seeds of division were sown even in this era of unity. Internal conflicts and external pressures gradually weakened Kievan Rus, leading to its fragmentation into smaller principalities. As Kievan Rus fractured, a new power emerged in the east, the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Driven by ambition and aided by Mongol overlords, Moscow gradually expanded its influence, consolidating control over neighboring principalities. Under Ivan IV, known as Ivan the Terrible, Moscow transformed into the Tsardom of Russia, a centralized empire with ambitions of imperial grandeur. The Tsars saw themselves as heirs to the legacy of Kievan Rus, claiming dominion over all East Slavic lands, including those that would come to form the territory of modern-day Ukraine. The expansion of the Russian Empire brought significant changes to Ukrainian lands. While some Ukrainian elites were integrated into the Russian aristocracy, the majority of the population faced increasing pressure to assimilate. The use of the Ukrainian language was restricted, and Russian culture and language were promoted as superior. Despite these efforts, Ukrainian culture proved remarkably resilient. The Cossacks, a warrior class that emerged in the 16th century, became symbols of Ukrainian identity and resistance against Polish and Russian domination. The 20th century brought unprecedented upheaval to Ukraine. The Russian Revolution of 1917 shattered the Tsarist Empire, creating a window of opportunity for Ukrainian independence. A short-lived independent Ukrainian People's Republic emerged from the ashes of the empire, but its existence was tragically cut short. The Bolsheviks, victorious in the Russian Civil War, were determined to bring Ukraine back under their control. In 1922, Ukraine was forced into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, as the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Under Joseph Stalin's reign of terror, Ukraine was subjected to unimaginable suffering. The Holodomor, a man-made famine engineered by the Soviet regime in 1932 to 1933, stands as one of the most horrific crimes in human history. Millions of Ukrainian peasants were deliberately starved to death as part of a ruthless campaign to collectivize agriculture and crush Ukrainian resistance to Soviet rule. Section 5. A New Dawn, Ukraine's Independence in 1991. Despite the horrors of the Holodomor, World War II, and decades of Soviet repression, the spirit of the Ukrainian people remained unbroken. The desire for freedom and self-determination smoldered beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to ignite. That opportunity arose in the late 1980s with the weakening of the Soviet Union. Inspired by Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika, Ukrainians began to openly voice their aspirations for independence. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986, a stark reminder of the Soviet regime's negligence and incompetence, further fueled the growing movement for change. On August 24, 1991, Ukraine declared its independence from the collapsing Soviet Union. This historic moment, ratified by a referendum in December 1991, marked the culmination of centuries of struggle for freedom and self-determination. Ukrainians from all walks of life embraced their newfound independence with a mixture of joy, hope and trepidation. Section 6. The Orange Revolution and Euromaidan, a people's fight for freedom. The path to democracy and prosperity proved to be a rocky one for Ukraine. Corruption, political instability and Russian interference hampered the country's progress. However, amidst these challenges, the Ukrainian people demonstrated an unwavering commitment to democratic values and their European aspirations. In 2004, a rigged presidential election sparked the Orange Revolution, a series of mass protests that forced the government to annul the fraudulent results and hold a new election. This peaceful revolution, driven by a desire for fair elections and an end to corruption, demonstrated the power of the Ukrainian people to shape their own destiny. A decade later, in 2014, Ukraine was once again at a crossroads. President Viktor Yanukovych's decision to abandon an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Russia ignited the Euromaidan protests. Section 7. Annexation and conflict, Crimea and the Donbas. The Euromaidan revolution and the fall of Yanukovych sent shockwaves through Russia. Vladimir Putin, fearing the loss of influence over Ukraine, responded with a calculated campaign of aggression and destabilization. In February 2014, Russian troops without insignia, later dubbed Little Green Men, seized control of the Crimean Peninsula, a Ukrainian territory with a majority Russian population. A hastily organized referendum, widely condemned as illegitimate by the international community, was used to justify Russia's annexation of Crimea. As Russia consolidated its hold on Crimea, pro-Russian separatists, armed and supported by Moscow, launched an insurgency in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. This conflict, fueled by a toxic mix of Russian propaganda, historical grievances and economic despair, quickly escalated into a full-blown war. Section 8. The invasion of 2022. A dark chapter unfolds. After years of simmering conflict in the Donbas, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022. This unprovoked and unjustified act of aggression shattered the peace in Europe and plunged the world into a new era of uncertainty and fear. Russian forces, armed with tanks, artillery and missiles, attacked Ukraine from multiple directions, targeting military installations, civilian infrastructure and population centers. The invasion, widely condemned by the international community, triggered a massive humanitarian crisis, with millions of Ukrainians displaced from their homes and seeking refuge in neighboring countries. The Ukrainian people, led by the defiant President Volodymyr Zelensky, responded to the invasion with courage and determination. Ordinary citizens took up arms to defend their homeland, while others volunteered to support the war effort, providing food, shelter and medical aid to those in need. Section 9. A global struggle, resistance and international support. In the face of Russian aggression, Ukraine has mounted a fierce resistance, surprising many with its resilience and determination. The Ukrainian military, outgunned and outnumbered, has inflicted heavy losses on Russian forces, effectively using Western-supplied weapons and employing innovative tactics. Beyond the battlefield,